Are we live or recording?
We're recording right now. Okay, well, then I'd like to call the curriculum committee to order. We are all present. Move approval of the agenda.
Second.
And we have no public comments that I'm aware of.
I believe we do.
Then Tim, do you want to jump right into the music, or is that going to be Molly?
Well, I'm going to turn it over to Molly and our music educators in just a moment. First of all, I just want to thank our elementary music team in particular for all of their work this year. I know it's been a very unique year. Molly, this extends to you and the secondary colleagues as well. I mean, this has been a tough and challenging year for, I think, all teachers, but I think particularly when we look at vocal performance, instrumental performance, unique set of challenges. So, I mean, that's not what this agenda item is about, but I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for all of that and for your creativity and perseverance. Elementary music educators have been working to bring some ideas for the board's consideration about the adjustment to when our capstone program is for elementary music. And as you know, kind of atypical when you typically see a capstone task for a course, historically it has not always fallen towards the end of the course. And so this is something we've had a lot of conversations about over the years. And our elementary music staff, in conjunction with Molly as department chair, have brought some ideas for how we can approach this in the future. Amy, I don't know if there's more you can add on to it. Okay. So Molly and elementary team, take it away.
All right, so this has been a couple years in progress. This was something we've been talking about for a number of years, and the elementary team has been. I just have to say they're a super high functioning team, these three, and Christina has been joining this year, and they've been doing great work. And so this proposal was actually we crafted last year, and then COVID happened. And so it kind of got lost in the shuffle and didn't become a priority because it became pretty clear that we wouldn't have any sort of program like this in this year's model, probably, right? And so we are bringing that back in for board consideration. And I think I might pass it, Abby, I wonder, or would you be willing to talk a little bit more about the specifics? Because just having, straight from you, I think is a little bit more powerful statement for us. Does that sound okay?
Sure, yeah.
Awesome.
Pardon me, I didn't have anything formal put together for speaking today, but I think I can speak for our team when our perspective for this falls into many categories. I think the biggest thing, like Tim is saying, is that, for our students, their music performance would be the most optimal if it was a capstone type of project. Having the full school year to be able to really get to know our students, to be able to have them vocalize with us, feel comfortable and establish those social emotional relationships so that they're willing to be able to get into an experience where they might not be as comfortable doing a performance. They might be bigger risk takers and maybe get even more enjoyment out of it. Certainly we feel that if we take our concert and we move it towards the end of the year, then we also would be able to access greater skills at that age level. Third graders and fourth graders would have had a whole school year of recorder so that, we wouldn't have third graders at the beginning of the year and say, here's a recorder, you play these 2 notes, now learn the song and perform it at the concert, and now let's learn how to play the recorder afterwards, which is kind of what happens for our kiddos. So our proposal was that we would like to take the concerts, keep the same idea of the format we have now, a during the day performance, same grade levels together, big groups, really no changes to the actual structure we're in, but just picking it up out of December and placing it into April or May. And having the flexibility of April and May to fit whatever works in our particular school schedules. And we would come up with some sort of rotation for the 3 schools like we currently have, so that, you know, Arboretum isn't always stuck right after spring break and that type of thing. I don't feel like there's any particular changes we wanted to make to the concerts again, but really it's that opportunity to move it. And, you know, I know that a feeling right now may be that this is being spurned by being supported by COVID. And certainly that's a consideration, but this is something we have been mulling over for a while. And that COVID just kind of, I think in our minds even helps moving it, because it does give us some time to push it out even farther, to really get to know our kids next year before we bring them into a performance situation, especially since they haven't actually sang with us in a year. So we have no idea what their voices sound like. And with our society post a pandemic, learning to be in front of people again and interacting and being able to be kids who are willing to do a performance, that's going to be a new experience for kids. We're going to encounter, I think, performance anxiety that we might not have encountered in the past. And we might even need to kind of rethink, you know, every kid having a special part. Well, maybe we need to kind of bring it down that first year for kids to make them feel more comfortable. So we're thinking of all these considerations, and that is our proposal. I'm going to open it up to Christina and Chris to see, do you have anything additional?
I think you stated everything very well, Abby. I don't think I have any changes to that. I agree with everything you said.
Yeah, same here. We support everything you've said, and we've discussed it together. And especially for me being a new teacher, I think it is going to be important for me to see those kids in person and build those relationships and see where they're at skill level wise, and in growing towards the spring.
I will also add that as a K-12 department, we think that this is also very sound, and we're willing to work. We think the logistics of risers and those kinds of things will easily be worked out without too much of a problem at that time of the year. Yeah.
And to be clear, I know you've touched on this, but I just want to kind of draw a line under this. When we say spring, we're truly talking spring. We're looking for performances that would follow spring break, that would occur in April and potentially in May, as kind of a culminating event for the year.
Correct. Yes. And we really looked at the time of year when we were talking about this, even pushing it back to January. But we feel like in that case that we're not getting a great benefit by just plopping it in the middle of the year. You know, our greatest benefit comes from pushing it out as the capstone type of project, not having it be, you know, at the very end of May where everything's going on crazy in all the classrooms and stuff. But if we could do that April, May, then it gives us the full school year to really get to know our kids, really work with the kids, capstone performance, and then a wonderful, like, perfect opportunity for some wrap-up time with the kiddos. Some reflection over how the concert went, and then those kind of fun activities that we'd be able to fit in preparation for the next school year.
And we did look at this in the calendar, as we talked about, Tim, after spring break and after all these little vacations. And in all reality, I think we talked about this with Molly too, it's going to be easier to transfer all of the different things that we use than it would be in December anyhow. So we have much more flexibility. We don't have to go concert, concert, concert. We could go concert, and then it would give the crews more time to transfer the equipment to the next school without it being so rushed as well.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of hone in on the dates there. So, committee.
Yeah, Mark, your question. Yes, it makes so much sense to me from my curricular perspective, the skills perspective. My only concern is the reception by the community of losing the traditional holiday celebration. And have you guys discussed any of that in your discussions? This really, this will be segment that let me see as well, because the one more thing can take anybody that out of it.
I think we're having a hard time hearing the end of your question there, Mark. Could you restate that?
Yeah, the concern is, have you talked about the impact this may have in the community, dealing with very special tradition at the elementary level just being taken away from them, something they're used to having and have before to their kids. That's
I think I understand what you're saying, and I think for sure that has actually been a huge discussion for us. We understand the significant tradition that Waunakee has with these concerts, and I think one of the things that has kept us from wanting to move it is because we do want to honor those traditions with families and the work that has been done for so long. I think I can say personally that I feel like now, if we're going to make this transition, kind of fits perfect into the world that we're in. There's so many changes to help equality, equity, to be respectful of so many different students. And there's a natural transition with the fact that we didn't have a concert this school year, so that it won't be quite as shocking to our community when we do make the change to a spring area. I think we all can say that we are slightly worried about, yes, the feelings that might come with this, and certainly don't want to upset families that we are ending traditions, but instead taking the perspective that we're starting a new type of tradition where, now this is a celebration of what your students have learned, as opposed to making it so focused on holiday music. And then certainly it also opens up an amazing amount of repertoire for our kiddos. We're so limited in the winter program to trying to keep it seasonal and keeping it related to that kind of holiday feeling and theme, but being very sensitive to our students and families' needs. And by pushing it to a different time, it just, we could have a camp out concert, all sorts of themes that would just be so much fun to get to include with the kiddos that would be equitable for students.
Was there any discussion of having a substitute performance in some form or some musical thing that would replace that in that time period at all? Or is that not even under consideration?
I can't say that we had a discussion about that. I think we all are kind of the mind that we still have so many unknowns in regards to our pandemic that, December still, with vaccinations and different things, still might not get us at a point that we can have some sort of, even a less formal performance. We're still operating under singing restrictions going back to in-person learning, and I don't know how long that will impact our curriculum. We might be getting back more into in-person stuff back in the fall, but it might not look like that even still for the music program.
So if I misspeak here, I'm sure that the music teachers will jump in and correct me. But I mean, I think one of our challenges with that we're trying to address through moving the program into the spring is, again, having the advantage of the whole year to kind of focus on the pieces, and particularly with the younger kids in the primary grades, not having to kind of rush in as early and coach them up on some performance standards for a larger audience. Now, maybe a more informal opportunity. There's a technical term that I know you've shared with me in the past. What is it?
Informants, yes.
An informant, right.
Yes,
So,
we love informances.
Right, so a more informal performance, maybe at a midpoint in the year, maybe in December, that might be feasible, but kind of more of a full scale thing like we're talking about would kind of go against kind of the curricular goal here. And I will say that, I mean, I think one of the challenges that they alluded to is that with the holiday policy, you need to have representation from multiple traditions. And the reality is some traditions have more performance standards for the winter months than others. And so when Abby's talking about the repertoire, that's partly what she's talking about there too. But, you know, I think, you know, one step at a time, but the idea of something a little smaller scale, like an informants, you know, is something that, you know, we could potentially look at, you know, later on.
Could I just say one more thing about that? Probably not this next year because we'll just be getting the back, but one of the things that we had discussed when we were doing all this changes was we have to remember that kindergarten through fourth grade, their main, we are to explore many different avenues, and they are not a performance class. And so if we continue to add performances, we make them more into a performance class, unlike the 5th through 12th grade, which are, you know, that is their main objective for a lot of the classes. And so we will have to be careful about how many performances we would add to them to take away from their curriculum that we have. Does that make sense?
Right, so, very much so.
Yeah, now this is gonna be a permanent change you're suggesting, not just in response to COVID, but just curriculum wise, it makes more sense, like you say, to have a capstone. So you're suggesting we have that.
Yeah.
Yes, we would like
Yeah.
it to be a permanent change. Yeah.
And as I said, this is something that we've been talking about for probably about 4 years. That it's not something that has come up recently. And it truly, I mean, what's best for these kids in their musical development and the curriculum that we offer, it truly is. We understand that there's the tradition, but it truly is what we think is best for the curriculum and for the students in their learning in music.
I really support this move, ladies. I think it makes really a lot of sense. I guess our challenge is communicating it to the parents. And I think if we can do that in a way that they understand the whole program and what's best for our kids and everything that you've said, I mean, I think how can you argue this?
I agree.
Yeah.
Is there any way to share this with the building PTOs and even the teaching staff prior to this coming to the board for the discussion? But I think that's the thing that would help show transparency that people want. We're not going to vote on it, and then all of a sudden now we've got to deal with it.
Would you like, that's a good thing. So
Yeah.
if you're gonna have it come to the board, maybe it's one we don't put on the April agenda. 'Cause
I would
that's-
agree.
I think that's too soon.
That
I
would
think
be
it's
one you
too
move to May, and
I
you kind
would
of give
prefer
some
to
time
do
to
that.
communicate that out.
That shouldn't cause any problems with implementing it. I don't think.
You know, maybe Annie can help in that communication. We just need to communicate this so we get the community feedback before we vote on it.
And I want to echo a concern, or just kind of the elephant in the room for us as music educators, is that we are willing to do some of that publicity, but it's really important to us that we have a breakwater for that, in that we feel supported by the board in a really sound way, so that it's not, you know, oh, those music teachers, right? And I think that's really, really important. We need to know that you feel really comfortable with this as well, and don't put that burden on us to do all of that communication.
I think the background that you gave for the reasons for moving it to the spring are excellent. It would be a good way to spell it out for the reasons why everyone is supporting this move, the board and the teachers and the classroom teachers also. I imagine you have their support. Is that correct?
We haven't discussed it because we haven't been back in school for so long in person, but I can't imagine that they won't be happy about this because that's such a challenging time anyhow. And so I would imagine they would love it.
And, you know, this is a busy time for our building principals and getting ready for our next transition coming up in, a week and a half for the elementary. But the music team has been working with the building principals, with this. So the fact that the principals aren't here is more due to the responsibilities they have with the pivot. Then they're very familiar with the proposal and are in support. And I think, that's something we can definitely, take back is that next circle of occasion.
If I can bounce back, I think what Mark and Joan said is, obviously, it's in front of the committee here today. I think it was kind of brought through committee and through the board just for the reasons we're talking about. Normally we don't bring kind of concert timing to the board, but I think given the history, the traditions here, and some of the recommendations coming here, which would shift that, wanting to bring it through this process. That's why it's existed. But this could certainly be a piece that we still have on the agenda for April as an information item.
I think that
From the
would be a good
curriculum
idea.
committee as a report. And then this comes back for any formal action.
I think that's
Does
a
that
good
seem
idea.
reasonable to?
I'd be willing to make a motion now to support the recommendation before us as a starting point.
And I would second that recommendation.
Okay, good.
And
We have to vote.
okay,
Mark, Joan?
Yes,
Aye.
yes.
All right,
so you have our support 100%, but we just need to make sure we're dotting the i's, crossing the t's.
Yeah, that
with the
communication
community.
is really important. We just need to do that well.
We understand.
And, we want to celebrate our community and all that it is. And so it is important, I think, to all of us that the community supports the work that we're doing. We appreciate so much of their volunteer time and being able to educate their students. So.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies.
thank you.
And Amy, I know, for the next week, 2 weeks, our principals are very focused on a smooth transition on the 12th for our kids. Is there some meeting time coming up where we can kind of connect in with the case board team on this?
Okay, so student progress.
Okay, what we're trying to do with this next agenda item is just connect with you again on a progress monitoring basis, kind of following up on the large presentation you saw in the full board meeting back on, was it February 8th, I think. And so Amy and I have pulled together some information that it's in my board book.
Can I just
It
ask,
was not in ours.
if we're all done with their aspect, you guys probably
Yeah,
have a
you guys
lot
can
to
head
do.
out, so.
Thank you so much. Yes.
We love
and
you
thank
at
you
the
for your
meeting,
time
but I know
today.
your life.
Thank you.
Okay.
So Rebecca, I don't know if there's a way to refresh the report.
When did you put it in there?
Oh, you know what I bet you did? Okay, yep. No,
I'm still learning the new board book, I think, but it came in maybe, I dropped in there about 15 minutes.
Yeah, if you just give me a second, I can do something. I'm betting maybe you didn't have your share count.
I got mine.
See that one.
It came in.
Here's like,
Okay.
Maybe if we just go in and out of board book, see if it'll.
Oh, because, oh,
Just because I think you probably had board book open already.
I do. Oh. So this should do it. There it is.
yeah, if you could just kind of bring the PDF up, and it's just a slide deck, and we're gonna kind of just walk through the slides a little bit. And the first section is basics.
Yes, so we just wanted to circle back after our February presentation and just give you an update on any new assessment results that we have received since that date. This is just a review of the assessments that we're doing this year and talk to you both with a small committee and also the board about how some of those have changed, due to COVID. When I presented in February, we did have the winter star, so we've seen 2 data points for star, but we did not have the second trimester report cards. And so I did pull out that reads at grade level standard that we looked at in February. So if we scroll up, Rebecca, this first slide is what I shared with you in February. This is the first trimester reading on the report card. And this is the one with a lot of detail on it. It's by grade, and then it's 3 years of data. And then it's color coded. Blue is the 4s or advanced, green is 3 proficient, 2 is basic, orange, and then that 1 is the below basic. And so that's last trimester. So if you scroll up again, this is the second trimester, which just finished. And if you kind of look across the years, across the 3 years of data, there are some, dips and, peaks, but overall, our students' performance on the meeting at grade level standard is not too far off some of our historic data. If you scroll up, Rebecca, this is an easier slide to kind of digest because I have added together the percent proficient and advanced. So the first column of each of those years is the first trimester, and then the shaded is the second trimester over the last 3 years. So obviously cohorts are always different. So if we take a look at kindergarten, this is the first trimester where we assess reading. We've had kind of maybe a higher cohort in 18-19. So maybe that was but then the last 2 years, the pre-COVID and our current year, are first grade though is a little bit lower. You can see it kind of varies by grade level. But overall, the biggest gap there is first grade for 10%. But some are only higher than last year. So this is something that Tim and I are committed to kind of monitoring this data and bringing it back to you. This, as I said, is the only one that I had new data since our February presentation. But we will monitor the same thing at the end of the year, and then I'll be able to bring back the star for you again, and then also.
And so we're going to look at.
I apologize, I missed it. So this is a combination proficient, advanced, proficient.
Yep, so this takes what's on the previous slide and adds together the blue and the green, just to make it a little.
So is the advanced somewhat less percentage-wise than previous years?
So that is better shown on the previous slide.
I'm sorry for the wrong.
So that kind of varies. So if you take a look at first grade example, so this year we had 16% who were advanced compared to 9% advanced last year. Or percent proficient.
Was that test for COVID though? Or was it this the COVID time? Have you been affected by it that year yet?
No, this is the second trimester, which ends kind of early.
So
it was
just
right before
Just
all of
before.
our teaching and the
Just
assessment
before it broke.
was
Okay.
done before the closure. Yep. So that is more of a typical year. But then if you take a look at second grade, we had 52% proficient, 21 advanced versus 54. So,
Yeah.
Kind of varies.
Starting at third seems a little bit more significant.
There are fewer kids advanced.
And 5 and 6.
Yeah.
Anything more on these pieces of data before we move on to the middle school? I think.
Well, I guess the question I have is, so what? And I don't mean that arrogantly, I mean, so see that, is there any plan in place to respond to those numbers? Is it
We
just,
always respond to our, you know, we use this all the time, you know, in our classrooms and in our schools. I think one of our major pieces that we're looking forward to is having students there for full days, certainly. And that allows us to have our response to intervention block or RTI block, where is the time that we are able to give kids a little bit more individualized, you know, what they need, where their gaps are.
and that brings us to a concern that came up earlier in the week at the elementary level. Full pass coming in. The concern about being able to give kids after less individual time than they have been, even though they have been more in the classroom now. Concerned because of fewer parents available to assist them in the classroom, because they're going to be used for supervision and, you know, those kind of things. And so very serious concern, I think generally held in that one building, that they're going to be, have less chance to work with kids one-on-one than they have now in the half-day model. And I know anecdotally from at least one situation, you know, where the first grader's not halfway through the goals yet, and they don't qualify for individual work. And it's so, I can appreciate their concern, that's why I'm asking. These numbers hit me, and I think they hit the community, but how are we going to address?
So, I mean, right now we have 2 hours and 40 minutes, you know, of instruction. I can get an hour of ELA, but you know, with the transition from one to another, I mean, that's kind of less than an hour. So while you might only have, you know, 12 students in your class at that time, it's a very short amount of time. And so, I mean, this will be, perhaps you won't have your educator, if you're used to having that, but this will be more like our regular literacy block that we have, you know, during the typical school.
Is there, do we have the resources to provide pairs where classrooms have extraordinary needs? So they have more kids needing that one-on-one that the individual teacher can provide.
I'm not sure about how the elementary principals are allocating all of the recruit some of our peer educator positions. We have, you know, the lunch and recess times, and then I don't know how those pairs will be scheduled during other times.
I mean, Mark, what you have right now is you have the pairs that are in the building that are at the discretion to be assigned as they need to be.
Right.
Certainly, if there's a significant issue, we're going to try to address it, but we do have some of the supervision type things, but that's part of the model coming back that we have to support. We have some volunteers that are coming in that will be helpful and assisting with some of that.
But not enough
But
time.
it's not going to be, but it's not enough, even I think if you, I don't think I have a barrier of dollars of trying to say, no, let's go hire, but I can't hire that many paras to into the traditional model. So there are trade-offs that kind of where we're moving to. And I think the piece Amy's talking about is more time in the literacy block in the way that you're addressing it face-to-face with kids, being able to see them and work with them in that respect has a benefit. But certainly when you kind of look back at how we hope we are as we kind of move forward into the next year, yeah, we're going to have some different ways that we can intervene with kids. But I think that trying to say we're going to get that it's going to be just as it was pre-COVID, that's not kind of where it can be right now.
It's not taking
slide lightly, but isn't this something we would expect when we have an interruption to the high standard of education we've had all along, and now we've had COVID, so I guess we shouldn't be surprised that things are.
No,
Right,
it's
right.
not reassuring to the parents either.
Would you scroll up, please, Rebecca? I mean, my takeaway is that our students are doing quite well. It's not, for most grades, a very large decrease considering the stresses of the pandemic. I'm very pleased with our teachers and our students this school year.
You know, one thing, and I don't want to overstate the impact of this, but if we can kind of spin back to when Sheila was in presenting our summer school courses for board adoption, the last meeting or 2 meetings ago. You may remember, and again, we'll have to see, you know, summer school presents some unique challenges this year as well in terms of who will show up. And so on and so forth. But you may remember that there is some reformulation of the summer school course offerings that have more next grade level readiness represented in the catalog than in previous years. Now, again, I don't want to overstate the impact of this, but that is, you know, one thing that is currently in process. And we want to make sure we kind of get that.
So you're looking at a multi-pronged approach to bolstering the kids' curriculum and their readiness for the next grade.
Well, I think as Amy noted, I mean, the RTI piece is an important piece for our most struggling.
Yeah.
Why don't we move on to the 7-12? We can always go back to more. So this is a slide you would have seen on the 8th of February. I do want to make note of one very small change, which is that the last purple bar is now a 2.9, and the last time you saw it was a 3. And the reason for that is there were some students that high school staff were continuing to work with past the end of the first semester that were not in passing state, that they were able to get into a passing state. So that kind of represents the final first semester one, and there's a little progress there. But I want to kind of harken back to this for 2 reasons. One is, and both of the reasons are kind of cycles that are kind of pre-existing cycles at the high school level. And all 3 of you, when you were in classrooms, were at high school. So this may ring true with your experience, but progress reports always have higher, I should say bigger pockets of lower performance. That's what I'm trying to say. Bigger pockets of lower performance. That raises teacher engagement. It raises parent engagement. Sometimes in and of itself, it raises student engagement. But by the time the teachers and the parents have engaged with the kids, then we have student engagement. And by the end of the term, you will see those F percentages come down. The other thing is that the first semester for high schools is historically, at least in our high school, a stronger semester in terms of GPA in many cases than the second semester. So there are more areas of challenge to work to support in the second semester historically than the first semester. So there's a rhythm within each semester, and then there is an annual pattern, first semester versus second semester. So this is the first semester. This is absence of percentage of all grades at the high school. And the next slide will be the percentage of students with at least 1 F at any snapshot at the high school. So you can see again, as we discussed almost 2 months ago, elevated Fs not as elevated if you've been reading the papers as some communities in Wisconsin, but certainly in excess of what we would typically see, which is concerning. If we go down to the next slide, this is our second semester. And this is the percentages of Fs of all of the grades on the report card. One thing that I do want to note for 2019, 2020 is once we get to the 13-week and the semester mark for 1920, that's when we had transitioned into pass-fail grading. But again, in this series, we're looking at Fs, and we did have Fs last year. It's just the grades above F were collapsed into passes. So this is still a very different environment, but in terms of what's on the transcript, you still have the comparability looking at Fs. You couldn't do a DF comparison, but you can do an F comparison. And what you see is we do have the elevated F percentage at the 4-week mark compared to first semester. It's actually a little less of a jump, but you will notice that the second semester numbers historically are higher than the first semester numbers were. And that's what I was referring to. If we go to the next slide, these are the percentage of students with at least one F. And actually here, this is not much out of line with preceding years. And if we go now, we'll go back to the middle school from first semester. No, keep moving ahead. Thank you, Rebecca. And again, this is where the middle school turned out in terms of F's as a final percentage. And then the next slide, Rebecca, we go down, is the percentage of students with at least one F. So again, the middle school saw actually a bigger jump in this area than the high school did. So let's go ahead to where we are so far. And again, that's 9.9%. That's a big jump over the baseline. Not that stark compared to the high school, but definitely a big jump. And what remains to be seen as we move through the rest of the semester is we're looking at this and we will keep bringing this back to you, is we will see kind of how that pulls in the rest of the way. And then the last slide, and it's not as, but it shows the percent of kids with at least one F. And again, you can see that number is also up. And so I think, the question is, because this is certainly is, the so what question is, exactly as germane here as it would be for any grade level. This is where all of those conversations that have been occurring at the middle school and the high school around student support time as we make the change. That's why those have been such intense conversations, because under the model that we are still currently sitting in, with the abbreviated day, it's possible to schedule a student to come in via Zoom to support at various points in the afternoon. Usually, if they're hybrid, we're not keeping them on site, but it's usually done by Zoom. There are limitations with Zoom, but you do have, as a teacher, a fairly healthy block to invite students to, conference with you for support. And that mechanism was instrumental in allowing our teachers to take those elevated F percentages we saw in the progress reports and bring down the F percentage at the end of term to something that was elevated, but much closer to our historical norms. Now, with the change that we're about to enter into, that afternoon block goes away. So there are a whole bunch of things happening. I mean, first, that block goes. However, now we have many of our students, not all, and that's an important aspect of this conversation. Many of our students are in school now for full time. And one thing you see from some of the national surveys, which again are perceptions data, is that you see your greatest impacts in bringing kids back when you do move to more of a full-time schedule versus the hybrid. And we weren't sure in our initial planning, but where we've sorted out is we are going to have a structured contact time during the day at the high school and when at the middle school. And so when Amy's referring to the RTI program, to the RTI block at the elementary, the secondary equivalent to that at the high school is the contact time. It's not that there aren't other ways that students can get support, but that is a time in the day where a teacher can request students for support. Now, because of the challenges of maintaining some accounting and separation of students for contact tracing, we're really going to try to do as much of contact time by the student being in place, and it still is probably going to be a video conference piece, so we don't have students spread throughout the building and back over the contact window time. It's not ideal. I would not compare that to the regular year, but we feel it's the best balance of support and risk from a contact tracing and mixing perspective that we can make right now. So that's the first piece. And then one thing we could have done that we have not done, while we are using a lot of our Wednesday time for state testing, and also in a week like this, it's a 4-day week. The Wednesday is not asynchronous, it's a synchronous day. We're running a 4-day week, even though we have a day off. We could have chosen to go to what is on paper full time, but the feeling from our staff, and I think they are accurate in their assessment, as they, almost always are, because they know what's going on, is that the flexibility remaining after you account for the state assessments and the 4-day week balancing at the middle school and high school, we really needed to keep that flexibility. So if I did want to bring a student in for extra support, I still have some flexible time in the week to do it. And so I think as we look at how do we bring in, as we did in the first semester, those F percentages down by the end of term, it's really going to focus on the contact time, the win time is still into the day, and good use of remaining flexibility on the Wednesdays. Now that said, we are almost certainly going to see, as we did first semester, a lot of success bringing those numbers down. But at this stage, I think we have to be prepared that we're still going to see a somewhat elevated F percentage at the end of the semester. And that's again where, from a credit recovery perspective, the design of our summer school program, particularly at the high school, where we're looking at credits that count towards a transcript, where students have that plan of their unmet learning targets for the course, and they come in and our summer school teachers work with them skill by skill or unit by unit to get them to where they need to be. We're probably going to see more of that this summer. And I don't think there's, I want to acknowledge that, but that's been a successful mechanism in the past for us for a very long time to get our students where they need to be in terms of credits. And we hope that it will be enough this summer as well. But the scope, we're going to have to go a little deeper into the semester to see exactly what the scope of that's going to be. I wish I had more precise information, but it's really going to come down to how the last quarter goes. Thoughts on that?
Will we have enough funding for summer school when we see that it's needed, some of these recovery things? Do you think is our budget there?
There's dollars, or when you look at, I don't know specifically the dollars we're going to receive from some of the federal stimulus, but there's enough dollars that I have confidence we will receive, that if we need something, there's ways to do it. And that's moving forward as well.
I mean, I think our biggest challenge this summer is not going to be resources, because as Randy said, we'll have resources to do what we need to do. I think a challenge will be that this has been not been an easy year for kids. And so, I do think at the high school, kids, their parents are going to recognize the benefits of coming in the summer. Our model doesn't if the student makes good progress on their learning targets and need to remediate, our summer school model does not require the student to be in school the entire 6 weeks. If they can accomplish what they need to accomplish in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, they're released. So hopefully we see the students we want to see in the summer. But I think that's really, my concern isn't resources. Like Randy said, we have enough. My concern more is, after a challenging year, will we see everybody come in for additional time in the summer that we need to, or will some of this roll over into next year? And obviously, you know, Brian is, you know, and the counselors and the teachers, they're working as hard as they possibly can to first reduce the number of students we're looking at for summer school, and then, if that's really the option that needs to be explored, to really make the case for the student this is really their what's best for them.
And I guess, I think we'll be all flat on it. Let's show an article today in the last week. Latest edition about concern about the pressure on catching up. And the health PISA has any kids in the academic PISA has any kids. And I think that pressure can come from multiple sides, whether it's in the classroom, from home from. And so I have confidence in our staff that they're going to be doing things the right way. I wondered, is there anything we can do through Ann to get a periodic communications between now and summer about, you know, not pushing so hard to catch up all at once, with the potential impact it has on negative learning and or the mental health piece, and based PSA for the, you know, might be worthwhile, yeah, every once in a while, just to remind them that all of, you know, this is one of the unknowns again that everyone's doing. More of balanced approach to that.
And I think
To
that's,
share some of the educational guidelines for it.
well, I think that's a great point, Mark, because sometimes, you know, dealing with something at a steady pace rather than trying to sprint through it gets you a better result in the end. I mean, you know, what I would say as a board, you've already done the biggest thing you could do in the short term to help us. I mean, when we brought the proposal in a few weeks ago, you could have pushed us, as has happened in some communities, to go to a 5-day week simply to be able to say we were doing a full 5-day week. And, you know, we shared with you, we're already using the Wednesdays pretty heavily. And where we weren't using the Wednesdays, we felt it was important to preserve that flexibility for student support. And so, from my perspective, I'm very appreciative that you have allowed us to move forward with the model that we have, preserving that flexibility on Wednesdays where we've got it to bring students in the fourth quarter in who need that additional academic support. And so to me, that's something you've already provided as a board. And again, as Randy said, we aren't lacking for resources, we don't feel, between the federal money and the referendum which you championed in the fall. We feel the dollars are there. It's just coming up with the right solutions.
Tim, will there be flexibility as, you know, I'm thinking of the middle school. So 8th grade middle school is algebra.
Mhm.
At the end of the year, if the recommendation, you know, most of those kids would go on to geometry. And so you have high school teachers who are scheduled, you know, X number of sections. At the end of the year, let's say 20 kids are recommended not to go to geometry, but to, you know, in their best interest, to repeat that algebra class in high school. Is there flexibility in the scheduling of high school teachers? So we need one less geometry and one more algebra. I mean, I just hope that we keep all those options open, so our kids can be placed where they just need to be placed, not what is on the
We've always
schedule
had
board.
3 sections of algebra, we'll have 3 sections next year kind of thinking. I'm glad you asked that
But-
because
But we might
Yes.
need 4.
we might need 4, and if we need 5, we need 5. You know, that's something where that sometimes does oscillate by a section either way. And yeah, that's gonna be a recommendation, it's gonna be a teacher-based recommendation. We don't have a predetermined number of sections. We'll see where the requests, in fact, requests have already come in, I just don't have them right with me.
But they may change, and I know there were years
Mhm.
when my class load went from 18 to 28 in a fundamental course because more kids were not ready for that next class. You can't let that happen in a fundamental course.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that is something, once we get past this coming Tuesday, that is going to be something we are going to have a discussion about between the 2 schools is, you know, we've put the course request in based on our best information available at the time. If we see changes, and I mean, going back to 4 days, the changes could go both ways. You know, do we want to make significant adjustments to the extent that we need to before we leave in June on the scheduling? Or is there something we want to visit over the summer and tweak in August? I think that there's going to be a lot of desire to do it sooner, but we've got to have that conversation. The other wrinkle in there is, you know, we are coming to you in about a month and change with a recommendation that we're working on. And Amy and I are sharing this committee on online options. And certainly in the minds of the staff at the middle school and high school in particular, that are responsible for drawing up the master schedule. Again, when we talk about sections, it's, are we going to have a handful of students that we're going to specially plan for, like we've always done? Or will there be something that will move forward that might require us to have a virtual section for some of our, you know, more common classes like algebra, geometry, English, and I know that's definitely on the master scheduler's mind. So
Good.
it's, you know, we're hope, you know, certainly I think looking ahead to next year, it's going to be 5-day weeks. It's going to be full days, but the schedule development for next year doesn't feel back to normal yet because there are some uncertainties about student placement. There are uncertainties about, you know, will there be different kinds of sections? You know, and, you know,
And, you know, just, and again, you probably have thought about this, but, and I know it's hard to schedule this, but, you know, would a student benefit from a semester of algebra instead of another whole year? You know, maybe they have a pretty good understanding, but they would, you know, and, you know, we used to do those 3 semesters, you know, some kids did it in 3, some did it in 2, and, you know, I know you have a creative math department, but I hope that all of that is on the table. And, you know, we have a, you know, a real challenge in meeting the needs of our kids next year. And I guess as much flexibility as we can keep available to do that would be great.
another thing that would be, and so now, I mean, and again, I think we probably have budgetary flexibility to do some of that. Some of those forward options might entail FTE. Another option is we do have the workshops that went up with our kind of universal high school math courses. And so could we see more students in algebra plus workshop, in geometry plus workshop? That's another possibility as well. A student might not need a semester of algebra, but they might need to take geometry with workshop support, whereas in a normal year, they might not have. I mean, that's another thing we're going to have to look at. we'll keep bringing this back. I mean, it's a problem-solving process, and, I think, our teachers have been put into a situation, like so many of us in different walks of life in the pandemic. So, I mean, I know this is true for many sectors. People are having to go about their professions, their trades, their specialties in different ways, and in other years, our teachers have worked so hard to adapt to the current circumstances, and they've had to shift. And I think they've done a tremendous job given everything they've had to work with. And I think they've worked really hard to support kids, and they will continue to do that. And I know our principals will continue to do everything they can to come up with solutions, but we will keep coming back with information. And as we have different support strategies, we'll be sure to share them with you.
So is this going before the board at all, or just an update first step with us, or?
I think it's really for you as a committee. It's something that, we just felt it was time to kind of begin to utilize our committee structure more. I think at the end of the term, there's probably a report that would be suitable to come to the board, similar to the February one, that would really cover a lot of it, but more of these progress monitoring reports, I think that's really a great thing to bring into this committee. And then if there are questions, when we go to the minutes at the regular meeting, we can touch on that. So, sure.
So, are you thinking of what's down the road for our next meeting?
So for the next meeting, we will have textbook adoption requests, summer curriculum writing requests. We probably won't have any more academic progress monitoring, but those would definitely be some of the things you'd be seeing.
Tim, that sounds so normal.
It does sound normal.
I hate to throw a curveball, but.
Oh, don't take my normal teddy bear away.
I'm sorry.
Not at this time.
Again, it does awful.
Yeah.
I was involved with the high school session yesterday. This is the time where all the high school teachers have always been full of things. What am I going to be teaching next year? And the reality is they're probably not going to find out until end of May. But so with regard to the remote concepts that you and Amy are working with, you have a time frame where you think some of that might come before us.
So, looking at the remote learning.
That's all the surveys come out this year.
Right, was a request you made of us as a board, and the deadline that we were assigned was the May meeting. We currently have a survey out for our teachers and for our parents. There are, and I don't want to characterize the work of the committee. It's a committee of teachers and administrators, and we meet again tomorrow. And the recommendation isn't going to be what Amy and I want. It's going to be the recommendation the committee wants. That having been said, we can't come up with a recommendation sooner than May.
Right.
But the high school schedule is extremely complex. And so we have to wait until there's a recommendation, particularly because the recommendation may have some implications that you as a board would have to adopt and be willing to resource. And again, I have no idea at this stage what we're going to recommend.
Sure.
But something we are doing is, as we get information on kind of the committee discussions, and as we get information on parental intent based on the surveys, we've got our first meeting next week where Steve Hernandez is kind of the AP that's kind of running the coordination on this, and our master scheduler, Melissa Bacher, we're going to sit down and kind of say, so what do we know? Is this going to be is this shaping up to be a small adjustment? is this shaping up to potentially, and again, we can't get ahead of our skis. We need to kind of, but based on kind of what we're seeing from parents and students, is this potentially something bigger than a little thing that may have a bigger impact on the master's schedule? So we're going to look at that next week. Again, not to take any planning decisions, because the committee has to make a recommendation. Ultimately, it resides with the board. But yes, we are going to kind of game out some different scenarios.
Well, there's a possible that even what you'd like to do is going to be feasible by fall, so there's a transitional model in place. I mean,
So,
depending on the complexity of what the.
yeah,
community is
so
looking
something
for.
Amy and I have said with the committee from the beginning is we have the first stage of the work, which is to bring you and the entire board of recommendations in May for next year. And the committee's work is not going to end there, but we've said to people, if you want to be with us for the first chapter of the book and then exit, that's fine. But this committee will continue beyond the recommendation for 21-22 to look at longer term things. And so anybody on the committee we've assembled now that wants to continue on that project can. And if there are people whose interest is satisfied with the recommendation for next year, they want to opt out and we need to recruit some replacements, we'll do that. But I mean, you know, we do have to be pragmatic.
Right.
You know, and again, we are not behind other schools. I mean, talking to other schools in the area,
Right.
they're kind of a similar phase in their work as we are. But yeah, we've got to be pragmatic about what we can support, whatever that may be.
Right.
You know, we've had one meeting, we have another meeting tomorrow.
Thank you for all
One
the
step at
effort.
a time, right, Amy?
It's exciting. Yeah, yeah. It was
See, like the
it
rest
was-
of us will fade on.
Well,
I have a lot of that, not a lot of that, not a lot of that.
judging by the surveys, there is some interest in the Waunakee buffet. Yes, that is certainly something we can.
I'm not even just about that, it's all the things you guys.
Okay. All right, anything else we need? To adjourn?
So,
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.
I thought I had a budget after this, and I don't, that was.